Thanks very much for coming. It's a good opportunity for me to come back to Whanganui, and good to see the Sargent Galleries open. So it's a very vibrant scene here at the moment, this new space. So I'm going to show just a couple of examples of my work and then talk about some of the events I've done overseas. A little bit of background, but like I said, please ask me any questions because I lose perspective about what's interesting about what you may want to know. So basically, I grew up in Nelson. I was introduced to carving by my father, who did it as a hobby. And when I dabbled as a child, and I grew up around a quite artistic, creative family. So becoming an artist was sort of a normal progression. I went to fine arts in Canterbury, and I did my first symposium overseas in Costa Rica in about 2005. And after that time, when I came back, I couldn't stand the cold, so I moved to the North Island and lived in Auckland for a while, then moved down to Taranaki because of the symposium. So that's been my real New Zealand base for a long, long time. So just gonna go through a few images. Obviously, I talk about the female narrative a lot in my work because as my perspective, it's been my experience. There's not so many women in my industry, particularly making large-scale work, so I think it's an important voice to have. And there's been a lot of challenges as a woman in this industry, particularly in New Zealand, actually. So it's been a way of, a vehicle for expressing different sides of that, trying to express the strengths and uniquenesses of women, and often in a defensive way, perhaps. But I've dabbled with many materials. Stone, steel, wood have been my base, but sometimes glass, sometimes bronze. This was a piece that I made. When I first moved to Auckland, I lived on Waiheke in a foundry with an artist called Oliver Stretton Powell. So we did some forging, usually in the middle of the night, because it's a little dangerous and loud and noisy, and it was sort of an urban environment. So these are pieces that I actually made myself. After that, I've jobbed them out because it's too much to really learn all aspects of every single material that you want to do. So the bronze pieces I get done in a foundry down in Christchurch now. And this is based on, the series came from sort of a dialogue around the use of weaponry as a defensive mechanism about, the rights of women and the place of women and the role of women. But it kind of came from early days when I was doing Commonwealth fencing, so when I was much, much younger. These are some more figurative pieces. This sort of style's become very well known in sort of a signature form of my figures. And obviously they went in a direction of more faceted and architectural elements, a little bit because of the process of steel, moving away from the carving, but a little bit to do with that sort of harder, more masculine side of the feminine. I became quite interested after traveling a lot in the idea of home and architecture and that connection between whether that's sort of a internal place or an external place and how we're affected by where we live and vice versa. So I started putting a lot of elements of staircases, which really was something that fascinated me ever since I was a child, putting them directly into the figure as a more internal connection. So when I travel, before I lived overseas, I was traveling maybe 6 months of the year out of New Zealand. So it became a real sense that my identity wasn't tied to a certain place, and I had to sort of take those feelings and that security with me. These faceted dresses also have become an important part. The dress has many different meanings for me. Sometimes it's about memory, about ancestry, about a way to project your internal self to the outside world, which is a way that we do as women or feminine people, or what you like. But these ones are more of a kind of an armor. So the hard lines, while they are still feminine, they sort of project a sort of a different strength and different side to that. This was, I think, one of the first that I did. So this is in Rotorua, was talking about World War II. And there was a story about a New Zealand spy called the White Mouse, who was quite important. And I decided to take that perspective, because there's so many sort of public works in New Zealand by men talking about the masculine view and the masculine form. So I wanted to talk about a woman who was particularly special. And it was important for me because the jury included Brett Graham, who for me is one of the most important influential sculptors in New Zealand at the moment. So that was quite a proud moment for me. This is continuing that series. This is steel. So this one's actually powder coated. A lot of the works I do are just using automotive paint, but powder coating is quite a different sort of process. The bottom was Italian marble. That was from a bank in Auckland, apparently. There was a long story about where that came from. Yeah, beautiful. So, but this is steel, and this was in Wallace Awards, one of the years. This is called the General Bitch Bomb, and she's very much a piece talking about that armour, that protection that we build up and that we project to the world. Came from just talking about protection, defence of nature and of feminine sort of feelings and elements, and reclaiming that word bitch as instead of being something provocative, being something strong in that ownership of that word, and turn into that. So, yeah. This was up at Brick Bay. Seems to be a thing about the red ones. I try to make them in different colours, and 90% of the time I have to repaint them red for everyone. There's something about the colour. This is stainless steel. So this is the first one that I've actually started to fabricate in China. It's difficult for me to let go of the process myself. I'm very process driven. And to job it out to someone else entirely has been quite an experience. It started because when I did a symposium in Canary Islands, they asked me to send cutting files so that they would have all of the pieces ready cut, and I would just need to fold and weld them together, which I don't normally do. I freehand cut piece by piece and just start at the top, and it allows me to find the form as I'm going. But when you cut the pieces and you tune up and they all have to fit together like a puzzle, it was a whole different way of working. Sometimes I'll use plasma cutter, but generally I get straighter lines with the grinder. So after doing that whole process of turning it into a 3D design and all of that, I decided, well, I may as well try. And that was stainless piece that came through from China. But it's something we have to get used to as sculptors. We're so connected to technology, and now most of the overseas projects require 3D programs. You definitely can't send a drawing anymore. Absolutely, almost can't send a model anymore. You have to be sending this sort of format. So it's pushing us. Because I imagine things quite three-dimensionally, I very rarely do the drawing stage. So I might do a little model, and then I don't do the 3D stuff myself. So, yeah, so I send that photos to somebody and they produce it. Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of symposiums too where used to be you'd go and you make everything yourself, but now some of the Asian ones, you send your design and they'll make it in the factory, massive, huge things, and you don't actually touch it. You just go and you direct a little bit, and then you go back for the opening, and there it is, the sculpture. It's quite surreal. This is just a little different series. I think every artist in New Zealand has done a bird, because that's what we see and that's what's around us. This came out of doing a residency in Lochmara down in the Mulby South. So there were these fairy tunes there, and they sort of inspired this, which is more of a man-made kind of idea of a bird, turned into these little guys, which have been, it's an ongoing series. These are from aluminium. So now I get them water cut, and then there's a lot of process about painting and doing the attachments. But it was sort of start of the series that talked about travel, movement, freedom, and those sort of ideas. Same thing, this is a sculpture up in Whangarei. It's called Oriri, which is the twin sail waka that came in there. This is New Zealand marble and basalt. Very hard to find large stone in New Zealand. Very hard. Like, we have a lot of beautiful, amazing stone, but large pieces, very difficult. Very difficult, yeah. What drove me into symposiums was the ability to work large scale, and it's more fulfilling for me, it's more enjoyable, and it's much easier to work overseas. Doing a public work here in New Zealand is difficult. It's expensive, it requires a lot of permits, a lot of organising. Whereas if I do a commission overseas like this, I turn up and I do the one thing I'm good at, which is the sculpting, and everything else is organised for me, and it's quite a nice way to work. Anyway, this was in Turkey early on. This was still from the bird series, talking about flight and movement and stuff. They have some of the nicest marble in the world also. Some landscape forms. This is New Zealand basalt. So like, we have absolutely stunning stone here, but trying to source large pieces is not easy. And this is a more recent series. This was called Collapse of a Non-Reality. So I had a gallery and studio in Taranaki for a while, and then I moved to focus more on my own work, and that sort of changed my perspective on things. Became more interested in architecture, and the staircase that had been in my work all the time had to sort of come out less like a base or a plinth or a supportive structure, and became more of the reason in the dialogue and discussion. So these are from that same pillar, Italian black marble. And this one also. This is Corten steel. More staircases. I love staircases. It's talking about, I don't really like to use the word journey, but it's talking about that progression through life, different stages, different steps, and how we imagine each time we get to the place we imagined would be amazing to be in, there's another place that you want to be in, or another objective, another exhibition, another place you want to be. I don't like even numbers in the steps so much, for no reason at all, just aesthetically. Yeah, I quite like the balance of odd numbers. Anyway. There's a little guy I made over in Benin, actually. So just incorporating that idea of travel to something grounded, which could somehow represent home. This is my best mate, Araya. She made this piece over here. So when I finished at actually no, I met her before that. In about 2011, when I came to Taranaki, I met her. She did a course that I was doing in stone carving, and she was just a natural, and so we started to share a studio. She's now a full-time professional sculptor as well, and we still share a studio in Taranaki. So it's she's like my right hand, and as a sculptor, it's quite different to other art mediums. It doesn't happen in isolation, especially big stuff. You need people to help you move it around, and you need to have discussions about, um, you know, your concepts and your aesthetic, because critique is really important. And when you only have your internal dialogue, it's a pretty closed sort of circle. So um, she's been one of the more influential people in the last few decades. So, and this is our studio in Taranaki. So yeah, these are the overseas projects. Most of the time, you have to apply with a proposal, so it's very clear, and there's an expectation about what you make. There may be a theme or something, but yeah, you have to provide your model, your detail before you go. Some symposiums you have the ability to be a bit freer and change the form and what you're doing as you go, but the bigger ones definitely you have a set plan. When I first started, I would apply to, you know, maybe 20 symposiums for every one I'd get, and after a certain time, I only apply to maybe 1 or 2 a year, and all the rest are invitations. So that crossover of proving what you can do to then having that reputation does come. So even with sending the models, quite often I don't have to send a model. They just say, come and you discuss, you know, I'm doing this kind of series, and you have more freedom. So that's become easier for me, because I do like to have a little bit of freedom in the work, you know. Scaling something like this up to 3 or 4 meters tall, I mean, it's different when you see the form in a large scale, and you might want to change something. And some symposiums are nope, like centimetre to centimetre, exactly what you said. And there have been times when I've been in a symposium, there might be some cracks or fractures in the stone, and people have had to drastically change their projects. And yeah, they're usually sponsored by governments to have a project to make large-scale public works. No, it'll be generally, the smallest one I've done was 3 people, and the largest one I've done in Iran was 100 people, including assistants. Massive. So it's something which isn't so, it's not so popular in New Zealand, but in overseas, it's a really popular way to do a project. Like there's a few here I'll show you where there might be a huge building project or a new city they're making, and they're like, okay, we need sculptures for here. So they'll invite people from usually different countries, sometimes double ups, but yeah, and then provide all of the logistics. Yeah, I did one in Qatar where it was just a sheik, and he had some Oman marble lying around, and invited 20 of us to his country estate. And oh yeah, you get paid. They buy the work, and they pay for your flights, your hotel, everything. It's sort of also expected that you'll get some touring, so it's also a cultural exchange, and with the governments bringing in other cultures making art, is they're showing publicly, you know, we have this art, we want to show you around your culture and all of this. So it's a really, really amazing way to travel. Partly because you're the package, you turn up and everything's dealt with, but also you get to see a culture and a country from inside, which you don't normally as a tourist. Maybe you might see glimpses, but you're outside looking in, whereas working like this, you are inside the culture with locals, and it's really incredible experience, and I love it a lot. I mean, it's something I do to balance other parts of my career. Sure. Yeah. This was, I think, the second time I was in Turkey. They do vary. This was 5 weeks. So it's about 20 tonne of stone and about 10 tonne in the end. And that's a long one. Yeah, mostly for a big piece, be 19 days, maybe 4 weeks. We're working hard. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But they, there are limitations about how long you work because they stop work certain hours of the day, and you just have to make the work in that time. And in that reason, it's a high adrenaline, high stress, high pressure job, and you have to understand not only carving stone, you have to understand structural engineering, balance points, how to lift something. Like this is a really complicated one to lift actually. So you have to know about stropping and design a work which is actually able to be moved easily at that large scale, because it can be quite dangerous. It's happened. I was in Egypt when a piece fell over and cracked in half. He went off and had a little moment and then redesigned it. Yeah. Yep, sometimes we drill in epoxy if it's absolutely necessary, but you should have some idea when you're looking at a stone. Like you check it out, you decide which area to carve from, which direction. And I mean, they're putting in a lot of money. Each artist in a symposium would be budgeted between 50 and 100,000 US dollars to cover them being there. So it is in their best interest to provide decent material. Yeah, but this was travertine, and it had a lot of holes. Travertine naturally has gaps and stuff, but this had, like, you could fit your hand inside some of them. So they came around at the end with the epoxy, which is like, where are you going to start? But no, and of course, working in this kind of environment is fantastic. It becomes like a family, a strange kind of family. You support each other and, help each other out. And this was a project in Egypt, Hurghada. Osh doesn't live in other countries, of course. They just bring you the scaffold. It's good fun though. Staircases everywhere. It was called Paper Fortress. This is in Oman. This is Oman marble, black and white. I actually really love working in the Middle East. It's some fantastic places. It's inside a mosque. And this is a very strange one I got invited to. I'm still not quite sure why. It was a ceramics symposium, very, very old one. And I just wrote to them asking, on behalf of a friend, what's the story with this event? And they said, come. I was like, I've never touched ceramics. No, come, it'll be fun. So they have this collection of over 1,500 pieces in this tiny little town in Serbia, and kilns that take 2.5 meter tall pieces, and assistants to help you, obviously, because you have no knowledge. Amazing studio space. There were a lot of hammocks around as well, because doing ceramics is not like carving stone. There's a lot of relaxing and downtime. This is the main assistant. So it's his job to basically make the work so it's functional. And this is one guy that he was training up. This is another sculptor. But it's very fascinating. Like most of the technique, while I went to fine arts, all the techniques I really learned were either by working with other artists or in symposiums, because that's where you really learn how to make stuff. And the process for this was amazing. He was building up these sort of armatures inside that looked like honeycomb. It's really fascinating. It didn't make me want to go back to ceramics, however, but yeah, that was a really good time. This is the first time I was in Saudi. So the assistants there were from Aswan in Egypt. So they're amazing at working granite, so they bring them to a lot of the symposiums in different countries, just to have more hands on the work. I don't know how true it is, but they told me it was the first figurative work done by a woman in Saudi Arabia, which is nice. Part of the reason I enjoy traveling and working as a female sculptor is because for me that's the best way to show other women, not by speaking, but just by your presence, by being there and doing the work, that other realities are possible. I've been in Saudi twice, and the difference between the first time and the second time was enormous. The first time, I think I have a picture. Yeah, these girls were the first doing sculpture in the university, and now in the symposium in Riyadh, huge symposium, there would be like at least 5 Saudi women. So the learning progression in that time is enormous. So many times when I've traveled to a country and of course you see a little glimpse, you don't see all of the society level and you don't see all of life, but the number of times it's so vastly different from what you expect. It is really important to go and see these places yourself. And yeah, it's really, really interesting. This is Korea, South Korea. Is a huge sculpture park called Mosan, which is run by, she's a colleague, close friend of mine. Their family have a big stone quarry, and then they have an enormous sculpture park and this huge stone factory. And they have, I only had maybe 3 weeks available to work there when she asked me to come. But some of my colleagues go there and go on again and again to finish their pieces, and they're massive, like over 15 meters tall, maybe 20 meters, massive. So I just did a baby one. Just some of them are, several pieces put together, but the assistants that they have here, wow, they make you feel like you can't carve stone, like a little Korean stone ninja. Amazing, amazing. And all these big blades. This is the little one. There's one over here which is 1 meter wide. One of my colleagues was working on a piece 6 meters long when I was there. Mine was just a little baby 3 meter one. But amazing having all this gear. And Korea is an absolutely fantastic country as well. Such a great experience. So they have a grey one, and then they have a black granite, which is very, very valuable, very expensive, and only certain pieces get made, or parts of the pieces get made in the black stone. So this is, I think I'm starting to rough it out at this point. Would have taken off as much of the last sections as I could with a big blade, and then they put it on a sort of a crane, shift it over and drop you down here. All water cutting, because it's used really, really fine blades. And when I turned up, my friend just started a piece and he was cutting a flat face, which was like this. I said, why didn't you just cut the face flat? He said, yeah, you wait, put on the blades. It was like trying to cut with an octopus. They're like a 9-inch blade and about 1 millimeter thick, and just, you could see it bending while you're cutting. So we would use water with that. It means that they're very fast, but incredibly scary to use. And it's heading into winter this time, so being covered in water for most of the day was pretty tough, but hard to explain. It's just something that you really love or you don't. I mean, big sculpture's not for everybody, but this is the factory manager. like I say, being covered in water and using insane blades is not for everybody. You know, we all started somewhere, like in New Zealand, we all start on Oamaru stone because it's, you know, it's accessible, it's easy. But the problem we have here is you have Oamaru stone and then everything else is really, really hard. So the jump up is kind of a bit difficult. But I mean, I prefer the harder stones. Um, it's just, you can't get crispy lines. Um, you know, doing a large piece, they last longer, obviously, they're stronger. Um, you get better at it. Yeah, yeah. It's definitely still it's, yeah, it's still a psychological struggle in yourself that you manage. Particularly, you know, most times you're doing a new piece, it's quite a new piece. I'm Some artists are different, but I like the challenge of not replicating too much. Um, Obviously, there's certain forms I use over and over, which I'm familiar with, but each sculpture has a new, you know, a new part to it, so you have to visualize it, and part of it is managing fear and adrenaline at this scale. You know, you just have to put the line on and make the decision and do it, because if you question yourself too much, you'll be there for days and you just kind of follow yourself down a rabbit hole into it. So it does take a lot of practice and training. And I've got friends who, when they first started, they said to me, "Yeah, do you ever get past this?" And then I've talked to people older than me who have said, "I never get past this." There's always a little seed, because there's an expectation, you know, as well. It's tricky. And this was a pretty crazy project I did in Egypt. And this is actually the place where I met my husband. So it was part of the World Youth Forum, called Reviving Humanity. So they choose one artist from every single country in the world. 3 editions, obviously, because it's quite a few countries, but they found somebody on every little tiny atoll. It was incredible. And then they've made this outdoor monument in the desert in Sharm el Sheikh. And it was a unbelievable. It's out in the desert, surrounded by these cliffs. The whole ground is polished marble. And these are marble with light in glass box, and inside is each person's representation of a heart in all kinds of different medium. It was, and then we were one part of the youth forum, and then we weren't really youth because a lot of us were my age through to 70 working. But there were, I think they flew 8,500 people in. Mostly they were doing leadership training and stuff, but we were doing this. Although it's a permanent museum that they set up, yeah. But it was really, really fascinating, because there's certain countries where you meet a lot of people from them, because Italy has a huge stone history, for example. Benin, where I am now, there's one artist who works stone. So there's certain countries where you very rarely meet people from, if you're doing metal or stone, or wood, not so much. But so this symposium, there were, I think, more than 50 people. This is just a couple, but yeah, meeting people from really, really vastly different cultures was amazing. Very, really none, but a few times I might have been 1 or 3. To Kupinga in Taranaki, we quite often have half, larger proportion. It depends. It depends. It's really something where I don't want to be selected purely because I'm a woman, but so, you know, you really should earn your place, but there are more men who do this work. It, Yeah, it's physical. Yeah. Yeah, there's some, but I would say the women who do it are amazing. You know, they might not look very strong or physical, but our strength is more of a mental, psychological strength than a brute force. You know, so we might use different techniques, slightly different tools, and yeah, yeah, but definitely there are more nature of the beast, really. Yep. Um, and this was at that event. I think the woman from Iceland isn't in this picture, but I believe that was all of the women that were there that year. Yeah. And I mean, it's a real camaraderie amongst the women because it's slightly challenging, because we do have some, you know, different challenges to the male sculptors. It really does bond you together, which is lovely. This is back in Egypt on a project for New Cairo. This is my husband. He's also a sculptor in Benin. So that's his home country. When we met, it was quite chaotic right before COVID. So there was all that in the middle. But we decided to live there because it's much easier, much freer, warmer, closer, less flights to take to get anywhere. This is it was a really cool project in Colombia. Um, the artist who conceived the idea, he conceived it actually in 1980, which is the year I was born, so it took that long for him to convince the local government to do this project. But basically there's a cathedral in an old salt mine in a town called Zipaquira, which is like 1,600 meters above sea level. It's crazy. And he decided that he should have a symposium and all the sculptures should go in this mine. And he wanted half of them to carve marble and half of the artists to carve the walls in the salt mine. Very luckily, I got given marble because, you know, the first time around there was a lot of problems to overcome with carving in. Oh, it's insanely massive inside. This is looking down into one chamber. There's many chambers in this place, all lit up, all with sort of crazy sculptures going around. But there were two spaces like this where the artist had to carve the walls, and there were problems with the dust. It was very difficult for the people carving here. This is basically salt and coal. The walls are just basically salt and coal. So it was an old mine. It was hard. We'd see them come up at the end of the day and they just looked like miners. And just quite cool. But the project was incredible. Colombian people were amazing. And in the end, they had some architects who designed all of the space, and they designed sort of areas to have the works and to sort of install them in different ways. This was done by my friend Ogata from Japan. He would have been 72 then. There were like 3 people 72, and I was one of the babies at that symposium. And they had the doctors coming to check us all the time because of the high altitude. Yeah, it was quite an interesting project, but in the end, it was a stunning result. That's the piece. This was the Biennale in Argentina just last year. And this is more of that series of works which are talking about travel and based on the paper plane, obviously. It's quite universal. You just see everywhere all the kids or people doing this plane game. So I like to use it as a symbol of, you know, connection and travel and things like that. So, and that we made 2. So this one we had 7 days for. The other one we had 5 days for. It was probably one of the craziest events I've ever been to. Never seen anything like it. I think I've done maybe more than 80 symposiums in New Zealand and overseas. And this one was just so different. The support and the interest they have for art in Argentina is amazing. We were having to do like 70 interviews during the time, and there were just thousands and thousands and thousands of people coming past to see. It was an amazing experience, and somehow we managed to make something. A piece like this, I really just prefer to work by myself. Sometimes there's just too much to explain, you know, that you just get it. Yeah, this is painted steel. Yep, yep. That's actually the bit that I didn't do, luckily. Yep. So they, you know, they offered to paint it. Yeah, yep. I do all the welding myself. Now that I'm in Benin, we don't have MIG welders, so we go back. So much fun. Love coming back to New Zealand. So yeah, but they, Argentina, very, very accomplished with metal sculpture, so we had the best gear there, best that I've ever had. Amazing. Yeah. So this is just a little look into Benin. This is the gallery part of our house. So there's not so many galleries in Benin. It's more usual that artists will show work in their own studios, and also they love the connection with people, so that's something they prefer. So my husband and I built a house over the last few years. It's 4 stories high. It has like a gallery. My studio's in the bottom. My husband's studio is about 2 minutes away because they like to have a lot of assistants and it's full chaos. So I have my separate space. There's a mezzanine, then another level, and then the roof level. But it's been quite interesting, more of the dark series, quite interesting going through that process. This is Beninese granite. Because there's not so many rules for building over there. These are hand painted. Yeah, this is a lot of the inspiration that's been coming to me after living in Benin because of, you know, it's just so vibrant and colourful, and one exhibition in Novotel. This is Minister of Culture. In Benin, it's much easier to be an artist. People are more accessible, they're more supportive. You know, the Ministers of Culture and that, they'll come and they'll ask, you know, what do you need? How can we help? Because they really see, especially at the moment, how important art is for their culture, for their tourism, for their identity. So I found it quite a different place to live and work as an artist. That clearly, that minister, he tries to go to everybody's opening, every single artist opening. He goes there, he asks about the work, they are accessible. There's no division like you feel in other places. You can call them up, they'll come over, have a talk. It's very different how artists are seen and viewed. This was at the government building. France gave back some pieces that they had acquired a while ago. So they made an enormous exhibition that's travelling with artists from contemporary artists, so made a big thing. I'm not entirely sure why I'm in this photo, but these are a collection of all of the kings from Benin who'd come to see the exhibition, and it's just how fabulous their clothing is there. It's so vibrant. And this is part of our house. So we have 4 stories in the house, partly because I keep wanting to make different staircases. And this is one we made from the 3rd floor up to the 4th floor. It's about 3.6 high, and we had to build it in place because it has quite a significant armature inside. But it was a really interesting process going from something I would just make as a sculpture to making something functional. And while I've seen sort of architecture creeping into my sculpture, it's been really fun actually building a house and being able to build it like a sculpture, because it's not like here, you can change things, you can add things, take things away as you like. So it's much more sculptural in the process. It's blue now. This is another one. It's just a sort of cantilevered out of the wall. And I've put the handles on the wall side. There's no safety requirements. You can do what you want. So we decided this one here was a trial for this. It has the spine in the middle, but this one has the pieces just coming directly out of the wall, which was fun. And this is the roof. These are some pieces my husband carved based on the traditional treasures that they brought back from France. So that it's partly structural, it's not totally structural. So, yeah. And this was from the second time I was in Saudi. This is my assistant, Hamdi, from Egypt. They offered me 2 assistants at one point, but it was enough. This guy, I've worked with him a couple of times, and when you're trying to, like you say, struggling with making mistakes, when you're trying to visualize 3 separate pieces, quite challenging because the faceted works to carve are very different from the curved ones. Once you start a cut, if it's in the wrong angle, you can't fix it. You have to complete it. So thinking about the one I was working on and the one Hamdi was working on, to have a third person was just too much for my little brain. So it was just the 2 of us doing this. It was 19 days. And this one was actually a competition, which they gave me the first prize for, which was good because it was about women, obviously, in an abstracted form of their national dress. But the sheik came around, and he was quite funny. He said, "Well, the women don't want to wear that anymore." I was like, "Good, okay, we'll continue this conversation later." But yeah, it was called Lighthouses, and it was just bringing light to the connection of women outside of whatever culture they're from, just as a separate group, and about women inside Saudi. So that was, yeah, I was quite proud to have the first place in that. First time in almost my life. I have nothing booked in next, so I can go home to Benin and be in the studio. Really nice to actually have just small moments in the studio without project.